Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our class. I'd like to begin by wishing a happy birthday to Fred Lavelle. He's celebrating his 80th birthday, Kanai Nahara, and he's sponsoring today's class in the honor of this birthday. Fred, you should have a blessing of Arichas Yamim, of long life till 120. You have happy years, healthy years, years filled with good health and nachas from your children, from your grandchildren, and only goodness and happiness. Thank you very much for the sponsorship of class. Also, a call out to Joanna. I got your email. Joanna watches us, I think it was from Poland, if I remember correctly, Joanna. And Joanna mentions that when I open and I say good afternoon at our afternoon class or good evening on our evening classes, I should keep in mind that there are people watching now all over the world. So what may be good afternoon for us is good evening in other parts of the world. So let's start with a good morning, good afternoon, and a good evening. And for those at midnight, I hope you're doing well and staying up. Welcome. We are in the midst of studying the chosen people of the book of Deuteronomy, Moses' speech, and Moses is focusing on the attribute of mercy of God. How do we get into the subject of mercy? He speaks about the sin of the golden calf and how God forgave the Jewish people. And what he is saying to them is he didn't just forgive you, but he gave you a second set of tablets, which means God is working on repairing the relationship. We started the repair by asking for forgiveness, by recognizing our sin, recognizing our fault, having a desire to make amends. But once that was accepted by God, then God goes to the furthest distance in trying to patch up the relationship and make it feel whole again. And in this, Moses brings down what we call as the 13 attributes of mercy of God. And this is just one of the attributes, and that he uses the terminology that God brings the clean water to cleanse the sin. So God himself is scrubbing the sin off our soul. And I finished last week by giving you an example of a human relationship, and I'll go back to that and continue from that point forward today. The example was, suppose you have someone you're close to for some 25 years, and then you have an argument with this close friend. And in the midst of this argument, he says, you've always been a liar. I've never trusted you. For the 25 years of our friendship, I never really trusted you. I never thought you were honest. You're so taken aback by this. The thought that for 25 years I thought I was close with you. I thought I had a relationship. Yes, it's bad enough that right now we're having a dispute, and right now we're having an argument, and right now we're having a fight. But when this line comes out that questions not just what's going on today, but questions how you felt last year and how you felt the year before, especially so when this is a close relationship. The worst marital fights that take place usually are the words that come out during a regular argument in which the spouse would say, and you know something, I've never felt that way, and I've never this, where suddenly the whole relationship is brought into question. The next day, your friend comes back to you and says, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I was so wrong in our argument. I was so wrong in the dispute. And by the way, that which I said, it was just coming from anger. You don't, of course I trusted you. Of course I always believed you were truthful for me. It's not true. I just said it in anger. And let's suppose it's a good friend and it's a good friendship and you did have good time together. And you sense that the request for forgiveness is sincere. She's asking, please forgive me. He's asking, please forgive me. The marriage was a good one all along. And the one spouse is asking the other for forgiveness. And so the other spouse or the other friend forgives. The question that I asked last week is, does the friendship ever go back to the way it used to be? When there are lines, when there are words that are thrown out about, for the last 25 years, I never really trusted you. How do we get that out of our head? And the next time you're together, Do you remember that line? And the next time, and the next time. Does it ever go away? And so the question can be asked is, whose job is it to repair this relationship? And of course, you're going to say, the one who offended the offendee. That's the one whose job it is to repair the relationship. Okay, they made the attempt. They asked for forgiveness and they were very sincere. That's all that the offender can possibly do. Okay, they can buy you a gift. They can buy you some chocolate. They can buy you a piece of jewelry. They can buy you something to show the sincerity. They can write you a nice letter. They can do all that. But ultimately, the key to bringing this relationship back is actually in the hands of the one who was offended. The greater challenge is on them. And the challenge is, can you ever let it go? Can you totally forgive? Can you bring it back to the way it used to be? Only you can do that. Can you make it seamless? As the example I gave last week of the water of the Sea of Reeds, that when the sea split for the Jewish people to go through and then it came back together, it says that it came back together that there was no seam. Can we ever bring a relationship back where there is no seam? Meaning we feel as if we could rewind the clock and it's just the way it used to be. That's in your hands. Our natural inclination is to say, look, I'll forgive you, but you can't ask me to forget the words I heard. You question my honesty, not just in this matter, but you question my honesty for the last quarter of a century. Every time I say something, I'm going to be thinking, does he believe me? Does she believe me? Does she think I'm lying? And that's the natural reaction. Why do I bring this example? All of this is about God's attributes towards us. God goes beyond that. And God challenges us to be God-like, to be in his image and follow his attribute of mercy. Because as the verse explains to us, when God forgave us for the golden calf, when God forgives us for our sins, he truly forgives and he cleanses. He brings clean water and he scrubs away the sin so that the relationship is back to the way it used to be. He's doing the hard work here. He's the one who was offended, and he's making sure it's cleansed to the point that you feel, that you truly feel that the relationship is back to the way it used to be. The greatest challenge on Yom Kippur is to walk away after Yom Kippur and truly feel forgiven, that something changed, that we were cleansed, that the sins that we turned to God and we asked for forgiveness was actually forgiven, that we believe it was forgiven. God did his job. God forgave, God cleansed, God scrubbed. We need to have to now feel that the relationship is back. And this is what Moses is saying to the Jewish people. You have to remember that when God forgives, he truly forgives. And he brings the relationship back to where it was before. You've heard me perhaps say in classes before that there's a phrase, and the phrase goes like this: B'makom shel bal tshuva omed ein tzadik gomor yochel lamod sham. What does that mean? It means that in the place where someone that returned, a returnee to God, stands, the holiest tzaddik cannot stand, which means that that level of the individual that made the errors in life, that made the mistakes, that sinned to God, but then returns to God, that is the most loftiest level, because that relationship can come back even stronger than it was before. And that's up to us. We need to make that move, to bring the relationship back to the way it was, to ask God for forgiveness. God will then forgive, God will then cleanse, and we need to believe now, indeed, that that relationship is back. There's a verse that is said by King Solomon, and the verse is as follows: as one sees their reflection in the waters, so can you see your reflection when looking at another soul. So King Solomon uses the metaphor of you're looking at a pond and you see your reflection in the water. The same way you're seeing your reflection is the same way you should see when you look at another soul. We can use an analogy of a mirror. You're standing in front of a mirror. What do you see? Do you see only yourself, or do you also see someone else's soul? And let me explain. You see, we have the ability to reflect off another soul. We can bring about a reaction to an action. Try it in a simple experiment. You pass someone on the street, you take action. You say, good morning. Simple, good morning. You will most likely get a good morning back. Simple action causes a reaction. Try it in a way without words. Smile to someone, and most often you will get a smile back. Children are great at this. You sit down to play with a child, they'll immediately play with you, whether you're a stranger or not. You smile to a child, you usually get a smile back. Strangers are the same way. A reaction, a human being reacts to another. We're built and designed this way that we can affect change in others. The question is, who initiates? Because if no one initiates, two people pass on the street, no one looks at each other, they don't make eye contact with one another, they don't smile to one another, they don't wish each other a good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and that encounter has gone to waste. That encounter was caused by divine providence to have this interaction. It may be an interaction of two strangers that were to last for 2 seconds. But if you're causing an interaction, a reaction to an action, then perhaps some divine purpose was caused there. And so we have the ability to affect others by simple actions that we do. I'll go off on a tangent and tell you a short story. This was during World War II, and the American forces were recapturing Europe. There was tremendous hunger and starvation all around. So the soldiers would have supplies of food with them to distribute to the liberated people. Amongst the food that the American soldiers had in their backpacks, there were also Hershey chocolate bars. And they kept these mini chocolate bars there to give to children. Children were always frightened of soldiers, naturally. And there's war and there's bombing. So children are in this total state of fright. So now you have liberating soldiers coming in that are the good guys, but the kids don't know it. And so how do you calm the children down so that they recognize this soldier is part of the good team? This soldier is here to help you. The soldiers would give a child a chocolate bar. The chocolate bar is what the kid needed to know. Chocolate bar means I'm the good guy. I'm giving you chocolate. From a child perspective, it worked. And so American soldiers were trained that when you're liberating different cities, have these chocolate bars with you, give to the children the chocolate bar, and this would lessen the anxiety that the children would feel and the fear that they would feel. As the story goes, there was this American soldier whose battalion was about to liberate a concentration camp. Before they went in, his commander called the platoon together. And he said, look, I need to speak to all of you, and you all need to listen, and you need to listen good. What you're about to see will be like nothing you've ever seen in your lives before. It's going to be different than the other cities that we were coming into. You're about to enter a concentration camp. You will never experience such pain again in your life. You will not believe that human beings could possibly be capable of doing this to other human beings. The people that you are about to see are skin and bones, nothing else. They have not eaten anything beyond scraps and morsels in years. And so whatever you do, as much as you're going to want to give them food, don't give them any food. Every one of them needs medical attention. They need to be brought back to health so that their digestive system could digest the food and not kill them. And as far as the children, don't give them the Hershey bars. They will not be able to digest it. Not yet. Their systems will not be able to withstand it. You'll be doing more harm than good. They can die as a result. Each one of them will be taken care of. They will be nourished back to health, but it can't be through you. So this American soldier relates that when he came into the camp, he sees this child, barely alive, totally shell-shocked. And this child comes to him and he's begging. He's begging for food. He's starving. And he described how his heart was breaking, a starving, dying child. And he couldn't pull out of his backpack that which he was asking for. And he describes us how he was crying on the inside. And he says to this child, I don't have any food that I can give you. And then he said, but I can give you something. I can give you a hug. And with that, he reached out and he hugged this child. And he said, I cried like I never cried before. And the child put his arms around me. And he started crying. And then he said the most incredible thing happened. Suddenly, all these children, barely alive, started flocking over, each one waiting online so that I can give them a hug too. And before you knew it, there was a line, dozens of children waiting for a hug. They weren't waiting for a chocolate bar. They were waiting for some human contact. After all the hatred and all the violence that they encountered, just a little bit of love, just a little bit of love from a caring human being. And then he said the most amazing thing, after the children finished their line, the adults came over as well. And each one wanted their hug. Each one wanted to reach out to someone and just hold them and to feel held. Reaction, action. We react to people. You know, I saw this throughout my entire life as a chassid of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The Rebbe understood that this generation, this post-Holocaust generation, more than anything else, needed a hug, needed an embrace. They needed love. The Rebbe understood that if Hitler Yamach Shemai demonstrated baseless hatred, then the Rebbe would fill the world with baseless love. And he went out and he embraced a Jewish generation with warmth. This was not a time for condemnations. It wasn't a time for judgmentalism. It wasn't a time for speeches of how come you're not observant. Every single Jew needed to know that they were needed, that they were loved, that they were embraced, and that they were vital to the future, to the very survival of our people. The Rebbe hugged a generation of Jews, and I saw as a generation of Jews hugged him back. They responded with love. They responded with reverence. We respond to human beings. That's the way God created us. Human beings move us. Human beings touch our soul, touch our heart, and they have an effect on us. So the Baal Shem Tov offered an interpretation of King Solomon. And he explained that sometimes God wants you to look into the mirror. And he wants you to see yourself. And he wants you to take a closer look. Not just to see only yourself. Because if you only see yourself, that's one thing. But sometimes he wants you to see the image of yourself that would cause you and motivate you to make changes in your life, that will make you see yourself and say, you know what, there's more than I could do. You see, we tend not to stare at ourselves. We spend most of our lives staring at others, looking at what they have, or looking at their faults. What the Baal Shem Tov is expressing to us in the teachings of King Solomon is sometimes look at yourself and say, and perhaps, what are the faults that I have that I can change? You see, there are times where we see the faults in others and we're quick to condemn. And we never stop to look in the mirror and say, maybe I have those faults too. Sometimes those encounters that I talk about that are set up by God as divine providence are there because God's forcing us to look in the mirror. You don't like the things that you see in others? Well, before you condemn them, stop. Do you perhaps have those same faults? You don't like the attitude of others? Do you have that attitude yourself? You feel someone is cold to you? Are you perhaps cold to others? There's a cute story from the city of Chelm. Chelm is this make-believe story of a shtetl of quite wise people. So there was this fellow in Chelm, and he had a hard time. And the thing was that he would go to sleep at night. When he would wake up in the morning, he could never remember where he put anything. And so it would take him literally an hour to get dressed because he had no recollection. Where's his shirt and where's his socks and where's his pants and where's his shoes? He couldn't remember anything. And so he would have to go for everything that he was looking for. He would have to look all over the room and it would take him so long. So in Chelm, if you have a problem, you go to the wise sage of Chelm. So he goes to the wise sage of Chelm and he says, I have a problem. I spend an hour every morning looking for every item of clothing. I can't seem to remember where I put it the night before. So the wise man of Chelm says, I have a solution for you. This is what you do. Tonight, before you go to sleep, take out a pen and paper, and you have to write down, my shirt is on the chair. My shoes is under the bed on the right side. You put down on this paper every single thing. And then you get up in the morning. All you have to do is look for the paper for one thing. You look for the paper, and you'll find everything that you need to find. Brilliant idea. That night he writes down every single thing. And he wakes up in the morning and he finds the paper. Wow, this is great. And he looks and the shirt indeed is exactly where the shirt is supposed to be. He looks for everything. Everything is exactly where it's supposed to be. But then he gets stuck because he says everything is where it's supposed to be. But where am I? I can't find myself. And he begins to look under the bed and in the closet. He looks on the paper. He did not write down where he was. And he simply did not know where he put himself. Every one of the silly stories of Chelm really talks about us in a deeper way. And the question of the silly story is, where am I? Where am I? I know who I am, but where am I? There are times that we don't know what we look like, not physically, but spiritually, of our own attributes. We don't know how rude we can come across to others. We don't know how selfish we can come across to others. And we don't stop to look in the mirror to find out. So what does God do? He sends our way someone to behave in front of us in a similar manner. So we should look. So we should take notice. So we should say, yuck. And hopefully we then connect the dots. Why did God set up for me to see this behavior? It's because I have in some ways this characteristics within me. I need to change. I need to grow from this interaction. At first, I felt as if I was the victim, but quite possibly it's me that needs to do the work. And I wasn't the victim of this encounter. I was the student of this encounter. Hasidic Rebbes often had something called yechidus. Yechidus was a private audience where a person would really pour out their soul and they would tell the Rebbe everything that's going on in their life, every struggle, every difficulty, spiritual struggle, physical struggle, materialistic struggles, struggles in marriage, struggles in raising children, all types of struggles. They would pour out their heart to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe would advise and give blessings and pray for them. It was an extremely holy moment to have this yechidus, this private audience with a Rebbe. There was one of the Chabad Rebbes who had a secretary, an attendant who took care of his needs. And he would often say that the night that the Rebbe would have these private audiences, there would be kind of this short break in between each audience. And during that short break, this particular Rebbe would often change his clothing. And the reason he would change his clothing was because he would sweat so much during the encounter that his clothing were sopping wet. And therefore he would need to change the clothing. Why was his clothing always wet? And he would explain, the Rebbe would explain, that each individual that comes in and they pour out their heart about their spiritual deficiencies, the only way that I can advise them on their spiritual deficiencies and how to improve is to first find these deficiencies within myself. If I found it within myself, I could then advise myself what I need to do, and then advise the individual what they should do. And going through this process of literally finding these spiritual deficiencies within my own life took so much effort. It took all that energy that literally my body would sweat from it. Every experience in life is a reflection for us, going back to what we started about King Solomon saying, looking into the mirror or looking into the river and seeing your reflection. Everything we see is really for our eyes to see as a reflection for us. We need to learn from it. We need to grow from it. We need to improve from it. They're not just coincidences. They're messages from God. They're mirror reflections, looking into your soul by seeing you in others. Does it not feel good when you're around friendly people? So be friendly yourself. Always reflect unto others. This is one of the attributes that God has to help us improve ourselves. This is one of his attributes of mercy, so that in his process of forgiveness for us, he really wants to clean it up for us. He wants to show us the ways to change ourselves. So oftentimes he will set up coincidences in our lives that help us find this path. One of the next attributes of mercy of God is called the remnants of his heritage. God does kindness, as he says, to the remnant of his people. But that word remnant in Hebrew, it's the word she'eris, which means the remainder of his people. But it also has another translation. And the other translation is to his close relatives, to his extension. That God shows kindness to his family, so to say. That he feels this special bond to us because we're part of this family of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That literally was the chariots for God, to introduce God to the world. And for that, we have that schus, we have that merit of being part of this family, this yichus, so to say. The Jewish people are considered God's extension, the nerve endings of God. I'll quote to you from Rabbi Moses Cordevero's translation of this attribute. I'll just read you one paragraph. He says, "Behold, how the Holy One, blessed is he, behaves with regard to Israel. He says, what can I do to Israel since they are my relatives with whom I have a relationship of the flesh? For they, the community of Israel, are the spouse of the Holy One, blessed is he. He calls her my daughter, my sister, my mother, as our rabbis of blessed memory have explained. It is further written, Israel, the people near to him, for they are his children." And you find this throughout the Torah, this relationship between God and the Jewish people. God has a relationship with all of humanity. They are all his creations. And obviously, you read in the book of Genesis, every human being created in the image of God. But he has a unique relationship with the Jewish people, with his chosen people. And this is what Moses is trying to get across to us. Not that we're loftier, not that we're better, not that we're created in some type of way, a Superman and the Gentile is not. That's not what Moses is saying. He's saying you're his ambassador, you're his chosen people, you have a mission to do, and for that he has a close connection to you. He feels close to you. And in the Torah, we find various different relationships used to describe the Jewish people. And it's interesting that in these relationships, they're not the same. They're all close relationships, but they're not the same. We're called at times God's sister, We're called God's brother. We're called God's spouse. Yeah. The relationships that we have in our life are not the same. You don't love your sister like you do your spouse. It's a different love. You don't love your mother like you do your daughter. It's a different love. So although we may use the word love to describe these relationships, they're very different types of love. There is a built-in natural love. A natural love is a calm love. And then there's a fiery, passionate love. There's a love of strangers when strangers come together. There's a love of grandparents that is generally a warmer love. A relationship with a friend is yet another relationship. With God, however, God has different relationships with us at different times and at different occasions. And so he uses these different terminologies throughout the Torah to describe how he's feeling towards us. At times we're his spouse, at times we're his child, at times we're his grandchild, at times we're his child that has rebelled and that has to sit in the corner a little bit. It's the child that sometimes comes home with that bad report card and doesn't know how to show it to his tati that, hey, I need you to sign this report card. But at the same time, your parent always remains your parent. I've told the story once of, the most difficult thing for a student. There's a lot of difficult things for students, especially today if they can't be in class and they have to watch on Zoom. It's very hard to concentrate. But there's other difficult challenges. If a student has their father or mother as their teacher, it's not the easiest thing. It's quite challenging. And it's quite challenging both ways. It's challenging for the teacher and it's very challenging for the child. The teacher doesn't want to show that he or she is showing favoritism. And so the teacher quite often can be far more difficult on their child than on the other students, perhaps expect more from them. Well, there was this one student that had his father as his fifth grade Rebbe, and it was brutal. It was brutal. He would always pick on his kid. He would have this kid just open his mouth for a second. You're speaking out of line, and he would give him -5 and make him do different chores and punishments. It was brutal for him. He couldn't handle it anymore. But the oddity was that the moment he came home, his father was this loving dad. But in class, he was this ruthless tyrant. And he couldn't handle this. He just couldn't handle this change in relationship. The moment you walk into class, he's one guy. The moment class is over, he's a different guy. So the kid was smart. And the kid one night at home knocks on his father's bedroom door. And he says, Tati, I have a problem. I need your help. Sure, anything. What can I do for you, my tatala? And he says, please, do me a favor. Speak to my Rebbe and tell him not to be so harsh on me. And the father got the message. God could be our father, our teacher, our king, all relationships of closeness. And what we have to do is we appeal to him in these relationships to please speak to the ultimate, to the king who makes the determination of the blessings in our lives and put in a good word for us. There is a verse that says, B'chol tzarosam lo tzar, literally translated, in all of their difficulties, talking about us, the Jewish people, lo tzar, b'chol tzarosam, you've heard of the word tsaris, b'chol tzarosam, in all of their difficulties, their anguish, lo tzar, I am there for them. I'm in the tsaris with them. I experience the pain with them. That Hebrew word lo tsar, I am with them. If you change the letter vav to a letter aleph, same sound, but now it means it's not pain. The verse could be saying, in all of their pain, the truth is it's not pain, or in all of their pain, I feel their pain because I am with them. The words sound exactly the same, but the meaning is very different. And the commentaries say that they're both correct. They're both true. And the commentaries, especially that teach the Kabbalah and the Zohar and Chassidus, explain to us that there are two worlds. There is a hidden world and there's a revealed world. Both worlds are true reality in each world. The revealed world is the world that we live in, and it's real for us. It's a true reality. We are human beings. We are alive. We have emotions. We have a heart. We experience sadness. We experience happiness. We experience hurt. We experience laughter. We can dance. We can mourn. We can go to a wedding. We can go to a funeral. We can suffer. We can go through illnesses, destruction, birth. This is all part of our reality, and every one of those things are very real, especially when we're experiencing them and going through them. There is another reality, and that's a hidden world. In Kabbalistic terms, it's called Alma de Iskasya, the world of hiddenness. In this world, everything is good. Even that which appears to our human eyes as bad, in the upper world, they see the good in it. We can't relate to this world, but we can, however, gain strength from this world and utilize the faith we get from it to carry on when life seems so painful. To know that there is a place, there is an existence, there is a world, there is a heavenly abode where things can be seen different from the reality that I am experiencing it. It doesn't take away the pain, but it allows me to have the faith that there is something going on here that I don't see, that I don't understand. This is a bigger topic than just the time that we have left. But I'm going to conclude with a story that will shed some light on what this means about living in two worlds. It's a story about the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement. The Baal Shem Tov was known as a miracle worker. He was known as a mystic. He was a great holy man that people came from near and far to ask for blessings in life. And as in all of these stories of these great tzaddikim that people would come for blessings, they weren't coming because this individual was God. This individual could not bring about the change that they wanted, but this individual could pray to God and can teach us to pray to God how to bring about this miracle. And so there was this couple that had everything in life. They were happy with one another. They were happy with everything they had in life, with the exception of one major void. They didn't have a child. And that void just continued to disturb their happiness in life every single day. And they heard about the Baal Shem Tov. And they made this journey to the Baal Shem Tov. They came into their yechidus, their audience, as we spoke about before with the Baal Shem Tov. And they asked the Baal Shem Tov, we have everything, we're happy with life, we keep all of the Torah, we keep all of the mitzvahs, everything is fine in life with this exception. We don't have a child. We're begging you, please, Holy Rabbi, bless us with a child. And the Baal Shem Tov started asking them questions about their city, about their hometown, various different questions, having nothing to do with a child. They were rather perplexed. They were surprised. We came to ask you for a blessing for a child. Why are you changing the subject? And as soon as they answered these questions, the Baal Shem Tov signaled that the audience was over. And they were dismissed from the room. Came back home. They couldn't understand what just happened. They waited a few months and they came back a second time. And again, they come to the Baal Shem Tov and again, please, we're begging you a blessing for a child. And again, the Baal Shem Tov changes the subject and then asks some other questions about their lives, changes the subject, and the audience is over. They come back a third time. And this time they have a little bit of chutzpah to them. And they say, Holy Rabbi, we came here twice before. And we noticed that both times you changed the subject on us. So you can do that again this time. But we will not leave your room until you give us that blessing, a blessing for a child. The Baal Shem Tov went into a deep thought. And when he opened his eyes, he gave them the blessing that they came for. They went back home and they had total emunah, they had total faith indeed in God that this blessing that their holy rabbi gave them would bring about that there would be a birth of a child. And sure enough, a short time later, she conceived, and 9 months after, she gives birth to a baby boy. Miracle of miracle, exactly as they thought would happen if the Baal Shem Tov gave them this blessing. They have this child. They are now the happiest people on the face of the earth. The child is beautiful. The child is wonderful. The child is the love of their lives. Everything is about this child now. Life could not be any better. When the child reached his second birthday, the child went to sleep at night. And when they came in the next morning, the child was no longer alive. The child died in his sleep. You can imagine the pain. You can imagine how heartbroken. This was the love of their lives. They waited so long for this. They loved this child. The child brought them so much happiness, and now gone. Just like that. No illness, nothing. Just like that. They buried their child, they sat Shiva, and they made their way back to the Baal Shem Tov. And they came into the Baal Shem Tov's room crying. And what they were crying in their words, they were saying, what did we do wrong? Why did God punish us? Why did something so bad happen to us? Why? What did we do? And the Baal Shem Tov said, I will share with you something from the hidden world. What I need you to understand is that what took place was very, very sad. And there should be tears and there should be crying, very sad. No one can take away that. But it wasn't bad. Don't confuse sad and bad. They're different words. But in order for you to understand why I say to you that it was sad but not bad, I need to share something with you. And the Baal Shem Tov told them a story that happened centuries early. And he said there was once a king, and the king had a prince. And this prince was brilliant, a brilliant prince. And the king wanted a tutor for the prince. And every tutor that they would bring into the palace, the prince would simply outdo, wasn't bright enough to keep up with the prince. So the prince let it be known that he's looking for a bright, intellectual person that could be the private tutor, live in the palace, and be the private tutor for his son, for the prince, and he'll pay handsomely for it. This fellow applies for the job. He goes through the interview. He seems to be the perfect candidate. He meets the prince. The prince says, this is the guy. This is the one I want. And the fellow, in negotiating his terms, saying, I have two strange terms besides for the salary, which is very generous. I ask that I be off 1 day a week. And I ask that I have a private room in the palace or which I can go into a few times a day and I'm not disturbed. The king says, absolutely. The relationship between the tutor and the prince begins to blossom. They study every day, and the prince loves this tutor, and every day they get closer and closer and closer. As they develop this relationship, the prince keeps asking him, why do you go into that room? You go in the morning for a while, then you go in the afternoon, then you go in the evening. And the tutor says, that's not for you, that's my private space. Yeah, but we're so close, tell me what you're doing. No, I can't tell you. What's this 1 day a week off? Why is that 1 day a week so important to you? I can't tell you. I can't tell you. Well, the prince is very curious. And the prince got connections to whoever manages the palace. And therefore, he can get hold of a key, which he does. And he hides out in this private room in the closet. And there he is in the morning. And he sees his tutor coming in. And he takes out this bag. And from this bag, he takes out a prayer shawl. And he wraps himself in this prayer shawl. And then he's putting these boxes on his hand and he's wrapping his hand. He's putting on tefillin, but the prince had no idea what this was. And so the prince jumps out of the room and says, what is this? What are you doing? What's this scarf that you're wearing? What are these boxes and these straps on your hand? And the tutor is all upset. What are you doing in here? You weren't supposed to see this. This is a private room. Yes, but now I'm here. What's this all about? And he explains, I'm Jewish. This is part of my Jewish tradition. I didn't think your father would appreciate that I belong to a different faith. I didn't want to bring it up because I'm not here to teach you about faith and about God and about religion. I'm here to teach you mathematics and sciences and philosophy, which I've been doing. This is not for you. This is me. This is my religion. But I want to understand it. Why do you do this? Why do you do this? And he kept on nudging him. And little by little, the tutor is teaching him about God and about Torah and about the Jewish people and the role of the Jewish people and the mission of the Jewish people. And the prince is gobbling it all up. And after this goes on for many, many months, the prince finally tells the tutor, listen here, I've made a decision. I don't want to be the prince. I don't want to be the king. I want to be a Jew. He says, you crazy? You can't be a Jew. You're the prince. You're going to be the next king. You can't be a Jew. I want to be a Jew. Look, whether you support this or not, I've made that decision. I'm going to run away and I'm going to be converted to Judaism. And that's the way I want to live the rest of my life. No one will understand me, so I'm not going to ask. I'm just doing it. You're either coming or you're not. And at some point, the tutor realized this kid's serious. He's going to do it. And the next night, this prince ran away. And he ran to some distant city and he became an anonymous Jew. He just lived his life as a Jew in this particular town. And that's the way he lived the rest of his life. No one knew what he left, but he wanted to live his life as a member of the chosen people. This is a story that the Baal Shem Tov is telling this couple that just lost a child. And they're wondering, why is he sharing this strange story about this prince? The Baal Shem Tov says, when the soul of this prince left this world and made its way to the heavenly world, there was a commotion. They simply did not know a heavenly abode high enough and holy enough for such a special soul. A soul that gave up being the king, that gave up being a prince just to be a Jew. Wow, just because he wanted to connect to Torah, he gave it all up. Where does this soul go? How do we reward such a soul? There was such a commotion amongst the angels. And the advocate for the soul says before God Almighty, a soul like this belongs to be in the abode together with Moses, the highest abode in the heavenly world, with Moses. Why with Moses? Because Moses was also a prince, and Moses gave it up to be a Jew. And therefore, this prince and Moses share a similar destiny. They belong together in the heavenly world. And God, as the judge of this session, says, is there any of the prosecuting team here that has anything to say? Do you guys agree? Does everyone agree? Is it unanimous that this soul goes to the abode together with Moses to share his eternal life? And the prosecuting angel speaks up and says, God, I have nothing to say. I have nothing to say negative about this soul. He was just a holy soul. The only thing I would say is this. If you're going to put this soul in the lofty abode together with Moses for all eternal life, there's one area, just one area that Moses has an advantage. And that Moses, even though Moses was raised in the palace, Moses was nursed the first 2 years of his life by his biological mother. And so the first 2 years of his life, he was raised with such warmth, with such holiness, with such spirituality. And in that slight area, just those first 2 years, there's a difference between these two souls. And so it was decreed, the Baal Shem Tov said, that the soul of this prince would be sent back down to this world just for 2 years. And God said, if we're going to do this, if we're going to send this soul back just for 2 years so that it can experience being raised in such a holy home, so that it could spend its eternal life with Moses, then I need to select the father and the mother who will have this mission to raise this child. Says the Baal Shem Tov to this couple, God looked throughout the entire world and he picked you. He picked you. He wanted a home of love. He wanted a home of holiness. He wanted a home where there was a relationship with God. And he picked you, that you would have the honor and the merit to bring this lofty soul back into this world just for 2 years, so that it would experience this love that you can offer. And now the soul of your child will spend his eternal life together with Moses. So is it sad? Of course it's sad. You loved your son. To you, it was your son. And that, I can't take away the pain. But bad, no. It fulfilled a purpose, a mission that's higher than all of us. That's how we live on 2 planes. We live in the world of reality, this world, but we have faith that there is a higher world that we don't always see, that we don't always have a Baal Shem Tov to tell us and to teach us what's really going on. For that, we need our faith that something else is going on, something deeper, something loftier, perhaps, something holier, something better. But so long as we're here in this world, we will always pray and long for that each and every single day is filled with revealed happiness, happiness that we don't have to look for mysteries, but that we feel it and we sense it and we know it and we experience it. We'll continue on this theme next week, and then we'll move on in the portion of Deuteronomy. Everyone have a wonderful week, a good Shabbos. I look forward to seeing you, whether it's Friday for our weekly sermon or Monday night. We'll be back with the biblical reflections at 7:30. Take care, everybody.